Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
This is such a wonderful day, isn't it? It's actually one of my favorite days of every year because it symbolizes how far we have come, but how far we have yet to go. April 3rd, 1968, one of Martin Luther King's last words were, "I fear not any man." And he realized that it was fear that was the killer of souls, the killer of hope, the killer of communities. Fear is nothing more than false expectations appearing real. And as you can see today, I have on my letters because today is my Founders Day.
Woo!
The ladies of Zeta Phi Beta. And Martin Luther King was a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. And as you see, his frat brothers are here today. Can you please give us some love? I want to hear them.
1906.
That's right. So most of our prominent black leaders belong to black Greek lettered organizations. Mine in particular began in 1920. So understand how pivotal that year was. It was a year after the most bloodiest and highest number of lynchings in America. And you had women that wanted to formulate something different and change, something that exemplified family and what we call finer womanhood. And I think that Martin Luther King would be proud of the work that we have continued for over 100 years. It started in Ithaca, New York, Cornell University, and that is the organization that Martin Luther King belonged to as we continue to strive all the way to 1968 with Iota Phi Theta. So I would be remiss if I did not first acknowledge these organizations that have been pivotal in the civil rights movement, that were some of Martin Luther King's first supporters, the first ones to march. And guess what? A lot of them were what we would consider children. Children. Emmett Till was a child. So our children are not too young to learn about our struggles, because typically they are the first ones we sacrifice whenever there's a conflict. These were college kids that understood that fear had no place in progress. Fear has no place in progress. One of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King was, "Whatever is right is not always popular. And just because it's popular, it doesn't mean it's right." I was explaining to my children earlier this week about a circumstance where the professor broke us all up into groups. And he gave us these problems, and he said, "I want you to identify which group leader has the right answer." So I worked out this answer. Different groups worked out that answer. We had about 6 different options. And I still stood there all by myself. At the end of the day, I was the only person in the class that had the right answer. I didn't know why people didn't choose me. I didn't know why they didn't listen. But I knew I had the right answer. And instead of supporting that, my professor asked me, "Well, how does it feel to be the only one?" I actually started to think I did something wrong. Well, you asked me to stand in my truth. I did that, and you make me feel crazy. And isn't it interesting that we're still kind of living in those times where people are trying to take us back to murder, to the dissension, the real killers of public accommodations, the reasons why our resources have been depleted. We constantly attack and discourage our leaders, the ones who are about their community. And we need to be focused on that. When we are up for these elections, who's really about their community? Who really fears and respects the opinion of the community they serve versus criminals and corrupt politicians who only want to continue to keep pillaging from the communities that they claim they are about progress in consuming? We have to do our work We don't have a reason to fear. Based on the blood and sweat and tears of our ancestors, and that includes everybody, not just African Americans. The blood, sweat, and tears of our ancestors that have made this democracy great, we owe it to them to push our fears aside. Us standing here today, we didn't have to fight in World War I. We didn't have to fight in World War II, Vietnam. We didn't have to endure slavery. And yet we're still fighting over the rights of human bodies, right? Because that's what chattel slavery was. It was acknowledging that we were human beings because they didn't want to give us a social status. But it still is the fight over human bodies. No one has the right to tell me what I should be doing with my body. And what I really see missing from that argument is the perspective of the Black woman in America. We don't want anybody touching our bodies. Dr. Martin Luther King, he died for political and economic justice. And when you put a value and a price and a right and a law on my body, you take that away from me. You are trying to take away my social action, my economic opportunities, by taking away my decisions for what I want to do for myself, my family, and my community. So let's continue the work of Martin Luther King and fear no man, no system. Let's do what we need to do to be conscientious of what we need to do to change it, to challenge those laws that have not served us. Things do not happen. You don't just trip into problems. They are caused by people, by other people for a reason. And don't let the system tell you that there's not enough. Right after this pandemic, we learned that there's enough. We have enough to change our problems. Because that too, just like racism and sexism, is a myth. It's a social fact that does hurt us, that does have effects, but it's also a figment of our imagination. It's only created to justify people taking from other people. So let's continue this fight. Thank you all for coming today. And at this time, I want to bring up Tony Austin, our former councilman who actually started the flag raising here in Hillside.
It's real nice what you said. Everything touched me to the heart. I'm sure it touched a lot of other people out here also. Beautiful. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today. I'd like to thank Unico for supporting me on this. When I first got council in 2014, I was just a freshman councilman, didn't know Angelo Bonanno, Lisa's father. I guess he might have been the president of Unico at the time. He suggested that, hey Tone, why don't you start this Martin Luther King project with me? He said, I don't want to be the first one to do it. He said, but I'll get you rolling. I support it. So him, Miss Doris Nichols, may she rest in peace, Maddie Holloway, I did mention Mr. Garrett, and Amanda. We found a Martin Luther King committee, and it's been rolling ever since. I'd like to thank everybody, supporting my wife, for getting us through this, and supported the next administration for even allowing us to do it. Because I just can't just put a flag up, but it represents, it's more than me, you know. We helped purchase the flag as a group, but the administration could have said, nah, we want to do something else. But I appreciate that. I appreciate you to continue on a legacy in Hillside for what we've been doing. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. At this time, I would also like to acknowledge our council colleagues and my peers, Councilman Craig Epps, Councilman Don DeAugustin, Councilwoman Lisa Bonanno, members of the Hillside NAACP, you can wave your hand. And also Amanda and any original members of the MLK flag raising that Tony Austin mentioned. If you could please just raise your hand. Thank you. We also have school board members here. Fireman Juan Allende. And Joanne Givens is here. And I'm very, very, very proud to announce our first African American fire chief in the history of Hillside, Rashawn Carey, who just got his promotion. So congratulations, Rashawn Carey. And in honor of Martin Luther King, we continue to strive towards no longer having any firsts, right? It's 2023 and we're still having firsts. So, man, we will have achieved much when that is no longer a point of reference for progress. So, again, congratulations. I would also like to thank Mary Dawkins, our Senior Service Director, and Brittany Santiago, Steve Augustin, and Al Hardy. I would also like to call up the president of Zeta Nu Lambda, Sherlock Dow, to say a few words on behalf of Alpha Phi Alpha, speaking about your frat brother, Martin Luther King.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mayor Patrice, for giving us the opportunity to be here and represent on behalf of Brother Martin Luther King, Jr. As Mayor Patrice said, Brother Martin Luther King, Jr. was a member and is a member still, once an Alpha, always an Alpha, of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I'd also like to thank and welcome all the other Black Greek fraternities and sororities that are represented here. See my AKAs and my Sigmas. And also happy Founders Day. On behalf of Zeta Nu Lambda chapter, which services Union County, I'd like to say thank you for being a part of this recognition of Brother Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And with that, I'll pause and give it back to you, Mary Virtue.
Thank you. All right, and finally, we are about to have our flag raising. So, Tony, you ready?
Yeah, Donna.
Okay.
Billy. Is Billy here?
Tony, we have the NAACP here as well, the president.
Oh, so you meant to NAACP president?
I did. Nicole Watson, president of NAACP. Right, thank you. One last person, I do see our former assemblyman. I guess they redistricted now, but I'm so grateful that you came out today, Reginald Atkins. All right, thank you all for coming out today. I thank you, and have a wonderful, blessed Martin Luther King Day.